Serge Nubret and Frank Zane are two of the most memorable bodybuilders of all time. This is actually a fan-requested comparison. This is old ass muscle would like to see Frank Zane versus Serge Nubret. And I have to say, these guys are known as two of the most aesthetic bodybuilders of all time, but really, there is some similarities, but more than that, there is some differences between these two. Frank Zane, very lean, and Serge Nubret was lean as well, but he had a lot of thick muscle in those pecs and in those delts. Trust me, he was more of a muscle man than Frank Zane, but perhaps Frank was more of a statue than Serge Nubret. I guess we will find out who I think is the more impressive bodybuilder by the end of this little picture comparison. I believe this picture here is from the 1972, or rather it is from the 1972 Mr. Olympia event. They both competed in this one, and Serge did place ahead of Frank Zane, and it's obvious who the better man is. Just from this quick little glimpse, Serge very impressive, but Frank Zane was still in the stewing pot for sure. Let's bring up a more fair comparison. This is actually a better pose for both gentlemen. This is a couple of years after. This is the 76, I believe, Frank Zane. Not really his prime. I believe he put on some muscle. I'm not exactly sure, even if it is the 76. It is a very impressive front relaxed position. Nonetheless, I would definitely give an edge to Serge Nubret, though. They're both awesome looking. Serge is just that much bigger. So really, you have to give it to him. Let's have a look at the back developments, and I have to say, advantage Frank Zane. He has a better back. Look, there's more muscle separation. And I know this is an old black and white blurry picture of Serge Nubret, but you can clearly see the lack of calves. His arms are just way too big to match those calves. And I noticed Arnold and Sergio Oliva were standing next to Serge in this picture, and his calves were a definite weak point. So really, we're starting the muscularity round with a clean sheet. It's an edge to Serge in the front and edge to Frank in the back, which I like. I like to rely on the muscularity round. And this is actually a battle. Frank Zane is not giving up without a fight. He is boxing. He looks better in the midsection. He looks better in the lats, even in the legs. But Serge, he looks good in those aspects. And look at his chest. But at the end of the day, guys, this is a front double bicep pose. And Serge looks like a man compared to a boy here. So it is close. I'm sure it would be 70-30, maybe even 60-40 for you guys, but I think Serge has this one. Front lat spread, however, and keep in mind, this is not a very good angle of Serge, but still, Frank Zane is just too good in this pose. One of his best. Serge, one of his worst, actually. But you can really see the lines of Serge's lats here. It is hard to see, but you can make hypotheses on these. And the camera angle is favoring Frank Zane, but it doesn't matter. Look through his repertoire. He has some awesome front lat spreads. One of the most underrated front lat spreads of all of the Mr. Olympia champions. Of course, he's no Dorian Yates. There you go, Dorian Yates. Side chest shot. Now, this is equally dominant in the favor of Serge Nubret. And this is a 1980 Frank Zane, which is not his best, but it doesn't matter. It would not even matter if it was his 1978, which was probably a little bit better, or was better for sure. Serge Nubret, one of the biggest sets of pecs bodybuilding history, and look at those delts. Really shines in this shot. So a strong point for Serge. But in the side tricep, I would almost wager to say Frank Zane's tricep development alone is getting a victory. Now, I like to try to maintain my posture with my judging. The front double bicep went to Serge because he was winning in the bicep alone. Now, this time it's flip-flop. Serge looks better in the physique this time, except for the muscle that we are looking at. And it was like Frank Zane looked better everywhere else in the front double bicep, except for the biceps themselves. I give it to Frank Zane. Look at that tricep. Just much better than Serge Nubret's. Taking nothing away from the Black Panther. Is that his name? Yes, the Black Panther. All right, guys. Let's have a look at the back developments, and this is an interesting shot. This is a Christmas tree flex, I guess, for the lack of a better term. Now, for those of you who thought that these guys were not in condition in the 70s, I'm here to tell you, if Serge was flexing that butt muscle, the glutes, I could actually see some striations there, and I'm sure Frank Zane did too. These guys are in just superior condition. Look at the back developments. Both of these gentlemen, just fantastic. Let's actually have a look at one of the mandatory shots, the rear double bicep pose. I don't know, guys. I think Frank Zane has a better back development. Now, I know the lighting is not very good for Serge. You can't really see the detail, in which case he does have detail we seen in that last picture. But I think it's similar to that of Frank Zane's. I think Frank might have a little bit thicker muscle in the lats. But having said that, I'm going to lean towards Zane because we all know he has the advantage in the calf muscles, and that does mean a lot in the rear poses. All right, the rear lat spread. Now, unfortunately, couldn't find a on-stage picture of Frank Zane, and that is unfair. So, by default, I almost have to give a point to Serge Nubret. And furthermore, he actually has a nice V-taper, maybe not as good as Frank Zane's. Frank does have that Christmas tree, but so did Serge, I believe. Just can't see it with the lighting. But the reason why I am going with Serge is, of course, the trap development. Look at the separation in the muscles. Frank's kind of went a little wishy-washy in this pose. Good Christmas tree, though. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's because it's an on-stage picture, competition picture of Serge, and it's not of Frank Zane. So anyway, this pose here, probably the most competitive shot in the whole matchup, and two of the best ab and thighs in bodybuilding history. I'm here to tell you this is a tight decision. Now, I do have a winner. I am definitely not going to leave this one inconclusive, but I'm sure I will get some criticism. I'm going with Frank Zane. I find that he has a much better ab setup. Now, the abs themselves, nobody can really beat Serge Nubret. Look how thickly cut those abs are. But it's the surrounding areas, the obliques, things of that nature. Then the flow of the lats, the V-taper. Just a far better pose. Now, when I say a far better pose, that's iffy. I mean, Serge Nubret. Look at those abs. Look at that thigh. I could see 30% of people giving this one to him. Maybe even more. But not this cat. This cat is going with Frank Zane in the ab and thigh. What a competitive matchup. Of course, the most muscular was not a mandatory shot in these guys' day. But I think without a doubt, Serge Nubret is just too big, too powerful looking. Although I will say that conditioning of Zane is out of sight. Now, there's another one here. And yes, Serge is just too much, too big, too powerful for Zane. But like I pointed out, it was not a mandatory shot. And if you are going to judge the most musculars of these guys, you might just as well throw in a classical comparison as well, or a form-fitting pose. And these two look outstanding in this single arm bicep shot, but I have to say, if Serge was getting an advantage because of his muscularity and the most muscular, then Frank Zane is definitely getting an advantage as far as the flow, the aesthetics in this shot. Look at that midsection. So really, there can't be any complaints about the most muscular win for Serge, because Frank Zane canceled it out with his classical pose. And I think I'll do that with the 70s guys from now on, even the 80s guys. If I am going to use a most muscular, then I should have an individual classical pose as well comparison. Anyway, let's add these points up to reveal that Frank Zane pulled off the victory. He won by a single point, guys, and we're using these old pictures so you can imagine if Serge Nubret had have stuck around in the IFBB in the late 70s, him and Frank Zane would have been doing battle, and in my opinion, they would have been trading back and forth who won the matchups, because it was that close. I believe whoever dropped the ball, whoever came in the better condition would have won. Whoever dropped the ball would definitely lose. What a matchup. But Frank Zane, here today is your winner, and I feel a little bit better about that. He had no weaknesses. He had calves. Serge, that was one weakness for him. Hit thumbs up if you guys enjoyed this comparison, and I will honor the first request to do a comparison on the comment section below. So get it out there, guys. Have a great one.